What's poppin', people? It's Dante, currently going for a nice hike here in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. This is a beautiful space to get away from the hustle and bustle of urban life. And so when I was a young boy, I had the Wissahickon Forest in my backyard where I would build teepees with sticks, bridges with stones, climb trees and swing from vines. I remember exploring caves, carving my own path in the woods and blazing my own trails. And you know, I remember sharpen spears with sticks and attempt to hunt deer. And I've always thrived in solitude, and I've always thrived on my own. You know, even when I would play inside with these little warrior figures that I remember acquiring from Piazza Navona in a toy store of the Crusaders and the Gladiators and the Knights, and I would set them up with these very imaginative stories and dialogue for each figure, and would always find myself playing alone. You know, I've always kind of gone my own way, and I think that is where I thrive. And so I thrive in solitude because I find that I can become my true and authentic self on the path less traveled, right? Where the chatter and the noise of other people can actually become a distraction for me. And so when I separate myself from the city and enter these spaces along the outskirts, I feel as though I'm at peace. And so while I walk here along these nature paths, I feel best. And so yeah, I think there's something in my soul that calls me here into the unknown, into the great outdoors. And so I've actually just started working here in Fairmount Park, and I absolutely love it. It feels like it's a big dream come true, where I essentially aligned with how I was as a child, always eager to go out and explore in the woods, right? And here I am just doing that on my break. I think that is perhaps what I found in solitude is understanding who I am, how I am. And yeah, I think over the past 2 years, I've realized that, you know, I can't be put inside a box, you know, both literally, physically, and metaphorically. You know, I need to be outside. This is simply where I thrive. And I don't know. I think that through this sort of solo journey of self-discovery, I've actually recognized my mortality, I think, initially, right? And I remember a scene from Fight Club where Tyler Durden goes to a gas station in the middle of the night, and he takes the worker out from the station, puts a gun to the back of his head, and tells him that he has to go and pursue what he initially dreamt of doing in life. I think he maybe wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, I don't know what he wanted to be or do, but the point was for him to go and follow that path, right? Like if you had a gun pointed to your head and you had to decide what you want to do next, how would you respond to that decision, right? I think of my time spent traveling and going abroad to various locations where I merely listened to my gut and my intuition, for I knew that was the life worth living. I saw through the facade of modern societal expectations really early on, I think. And yeah, I think through traveling and exploring other places and cultures, I've learned a lot, actually. I think more than I can actually learn from a book. You know, I've got this new book I'm reading here on Sparta by Plutarch. Yeah, I've been reading a lot of ancient Greek stuff. And actually, the more I contemplate these old texts, consider the Bible, right? There's some truth in these works, right? There's some truth in the Old and the New Testament, in the Quran, in the Torah. You know, there's truth in ancient Greek philosophy and stories and myths. I think that's where real wisdom can be drawn from. It's these ancient texts as they stand the test of time, and maybe they're the only things worth paying attention to. You know, you think of time and spending time. These notions too are interesting, right? Where time is money, and how do you want to spend your time while you are alive? You know, for we are mortal, and I think that is something worth recognizing each and every day when I wake up. You know, is this gonna be my last? Who knows? You know, so for that, I am simply grateful to have another day, to have another breath, to simply have the ability to walk, you know? And so what are we paying attention to? You know, I think a lot of the modern media and things that are being even taught in schools these days aren't even worth paying attention to. I think we can derive all of our knowledge and wisdom through experiences and perhaps ancient texts, you know, for they've stood the test of time. So paying attention to celebrities, paying attention to Hollywood, paying attention to modern music, you know, paying attention to these things that are happening in society right now in modernity is quite a way to squander your time, I think. And so I find peace of mind in learning from the past. And maybe this idea I had was that why religion is important, right? So religion, it's important because I believe it's what holds a community together, you know. And religion is something that we've perhaps replaced with bureaucracy, you know, where bureaucracy is our new god. You know, all of these systems that we put in place here in the United States specifically are what feed us and put food on our plates. And I think that we lose touch with community, family, and having common morals that guide us in our everyday lives, such as the stories and teachings of Prophet Muhammad or of Jesus, you know, and all of the various prophets such as Moses. You know, there's something that is lacking when we lead ourselves astray from ancient wisdom and replace it with modern systems. And when I lived in Jericho specifically, I'll never forget that feeling at the lowest elevated city in the world. And you know, when I put my head down on a mat submitting to God in a mosque with a group of brothers, I think that is where I truly found God. That's where I felt the presence of God. And I think that was something missing since leaving a Roman Catholic school from pre-K to grade 8 through high school, going to a public school and then college, right? You kind of lose your faith. And I remember recalling this experience in Jericho in the mosque and how uplifting it was, and how afterwards I was invited into the home of some brothers and they shared tea and coffee and a meal with me, and we went on an adventure in a car and drove to the top of the mountains of Wadi Kelt, looking out towards the monasteries, the Dead Sea, and these beautiful landscapes. And we danced and we sung and we had this common experience despite our language barrier. And I think this is the power of religion, is the way in which it unites people together under one God in a tribe sharing the land. And that hierarchy is something that I witnessed during my Peace Corps service in Zambia, Africa, where at the center of the village there is this church. And within the church we have an altar where a sacrifice is made, and everybody comes together and recalls the stories of Jesus. And having this archetype, this teacher, Jesus, at the center of the village, people in the village strive to become like Jesus. People in the village strive to become the greatest version of themselves. And there's something very wise in the teaching of Jesus to treat your neighbor like thyself. And I believe that when everybody is striving to become the greatest versions of themselves, how are you going to treat your neighbor? You're going to treat them with utmost respect. I remember coming out of the masjid and seeing the way they kiss and hug and greet each other and come together in union with compassion and love. You know, there's something that binds people together morally. And I think that it's possible to change the world through changing yourself, right? And so by changing yourself and striving to become the greatest version of yourself, in turn, you can then impact the lives of others. And perhaps, yeah, that's the only thing that you can really do in modern society, in a city where we kind of are man versus man, sort of just fending for ourselves. Let me get as much cheese for myself. Let me not share. Let me, you know, you indulge more, and you don't really consider your brother, your sister, your neighbor. And I think that is a problem, but it's inevitable. And so, yeah, maybe religion now becomes this pseudo-religion of veganism or the climate and different things that are trivial and minute and don't really have anything to do with the traditions. But maybe we replace religion now with other things, and you know, it's maybe just a weird world generally that we live in. And when you have the perception of other places, it shapes your reality. And I think that applying this perception I have of the world and life and how I've seen places thrive together, I can't help but to see the problems that we face in urban cities, right? It's quite evident. If you walk around, things aren't really that okay. You know, you can't even use a public restroom without having piss all over the seat, which is like, it's like there's piss all over the seat. It smells. There's people that are in there shaving, and there's so much homelessness, and there's so much chaos, and you know, there's so much violence. And you know, I remember being in a bathroom one day, and this man was telling me how he wanted to grab a gun and start shooting people, and I was like, what? Whoa, like, let me get, like, you can't even use the public restroom without being surrounded by this strange sort of atmosphere, you know. So I don't know, it's like, can you wipe the seat down before you leave for your neighbor, or you're just gonna piss everywhere, you know? It's funny. It's just a random thought I had. And I feel like that's kind of maybe a good place to end, right? We're kind of just pissing in the wind, just pissing everywhere. And I'm gonna go and find my tree out here under some leaves and go piss myself. Claim my territory out here, man. You know, one of the things I learned during my Peace Corps service was self-sufficiency. I remember when I arrived, I was presented with a goat hanging from a tree to slaughter with a knife, and we feasted all week. You know, I would buy chickens from the village and prepare them by hand through slaughtering and boiling and plucking the feathers. And I would pretty much do everything by hand, right? You draw the water from the well. Here in the United States, we take these very simple things for granted, where we have clean water from a tap. You know, I have grass-fed beef in my fridge right now. You know, and I think when I consider health, right, this is the ultimate sign of wealth. And all of the material things that we pursue, whether it's the fancy car or the vacations and, you know, all of the things that society deems to be valuable, it's quite meaningless at the end of the day. And having good health and the ability to move your legs and walk and stand upright and be outside, it's actually so simple yet so meaningful, and sets things into perspective for how I wish to live my life going forward as I go about my journey. You know, through photography, exploration, the great outdoors is where I thrive. And I feel as though I've finally feel like I've aligned and found my place here in the city of Philadelphia, among the ruins, standing tall. And I'm pretty grateful to even have found my own little symposium where I can find recluse by this beautiful pavilion in the trees. There's a nice little ant, and it always reminds me that you're not just another ant in a colony. You know, I think each ant has a vital role to play, and yeah, maybe my role is to simply embrace the spirit of play. Yeah, I just want to be left alone. I just want to be a big kid chilling out here in my treehouse. That's really all I have to say. Looks so nice. Oh yeah. Ricoh Geo3X, high contrast black and white, snap focus infinity, P mode. That's a nice shot. I like that we have soft light today. It provides a different effect visually. Usually the sun's piercing through here. It's nice. Oh yeah, that's really cool.